Greetings and welcome to the Daily Article Podcast for Monday, March the 3rd, 2025. I'm Chris Elkins with the Denison Forum, narrating today's Daily Article written by our co-founder and CEO, Dr. Jim Denison. Anora won Best Picture at last night's Academy Awards and 5 Oscars in all. According to NPR, the film is, quote, the story of a sex worker who marries a former client and gets mixed up with some Russian oligarchs, end quote. I had to quote them since I will not see the film due to its graphic nudity. It also normalizes prostitution, euphemistically called the sex worker community. Great cinema is apparently in the eye of the beholder, and many of the beholders are not many of us. The Atlantic headlined, "The Oscars have left the mainstream moviegoer behind." NPR reports that the more popular the movie, the less likely it is to win awards. Then there are the politics. Host Conan O'Brien made a joke about President Donald Trump's relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying of Anora, "I guess Americans are excited to see somebody finally stand up to a powerful Russian," end quote. The audience cheered loudly. Daryl Hannah voiced a traditional Ukrainian battle cry when she took the stage to present the award for Best Film Editing. Some actors wore, quote, Gaza red hand protest pins that many Jews consider an explicit reference to a year 2000 incident in which a group of Palestinians murdered Israeli reservists and then held up their bloody red hands to the delight of a cheering crowd. But it wasn't always this way. When Marlon Brando protested Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans in 1973 by sending an activist named Sacheen Littlefeather to refuse his Best Actor Oscar for The Godfather, his gesture was met with mockery and boos. Ironically, Littlefeather was later found to have fabricated her claims of Native American heritage. In 2003, when Michael Moore used his Oscar acceptance speech to launch a tirade against George W. Bush and the war in Iraq, he was booed. However, as Kat Rosenfeld writes in The Free Press, the dawn of social media and the rise of Trump, as well as a media class that dutifully exerted itself to ostracize those who failed to support the proper progressive causes, made it increasingly untenable for actors even to remain neutral on political matters, end quote. As a result, the 2024 election cycle saw a political ad voiced by Julia Roberts, a Democratic National Committee headlined by Oprah Winfrey, and the cast of The Avengers assembling to campaign for Kamala Harris. Parenthetically, the former vice president was planning to appear at last night's Oscars, but security concerns led her to stay home. One critic alleges that Hollywood's pivot to, quote, woke content and advocacy has killed the Oscars. But many in Hollywood don't seem to have gotten the message. By contrast, over the weekend, my wife and I watched Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Spy, Assassin. The film was released last November, but we missed seeing it in theaters and were deeply grateful to have caught it on video. The movie tells the incredible story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a brilliant German theologian and pastor who opposed the rise of Nazism and its takeover of much of the German church. He could have stayed in the U.S. and protested Hitler from a considerable platform of cultural and theological influence, but he felt that he had to return to his native country to join the effort to end the Third Reich and for the sake of the Jews and his own people. As a result, he was hanged just 2 weeks before American soldiers liberated his concentration camp. Given the political leanings of Hollywood these days, it is unsurprising that Bonhoeffer was not nominated for an Academy Award. But comparing it with the film celebrated last night raises a point worth reflecting on long after the Oscars are forgotten. You and I were created in God's image according to Genesis 1 verse 27, and therefore have His innate desire to protect and improve His creation affirmed in Genesis 2 verse 15. However, if we do not submit this desire to His Spirit, Word, and will, we will use it to express our own will to power as our own gods, referencing Genesis 3 verse 5. This is the lens through which I see the desire of many in Hollywood to promote social causes. They want to believe that they are making a difference that matters. They know, as actor Gabriel Basso said recently in criticizing politics in his industry, that they're, quote, there to entertain and that their work makes no appreciable difference in the world on its own merits. Movies don't plant crops, build bridges, or end wars. And so they want to use their platform to influence people to do what they cannot do themselves. I feel the same impulse. When I pray that the Spirit uses my words to change hearts and lives, I know that my words do not plant crops, build bridges, or end wars. So I work with the aspiration that they will influence people to do what I cannot do myself. The difference, though, is the outcome we wish to see in the world. I believe it grieves God deeply when movies lambaste biblical faith and glorify sexual immorality, anti-Semitism, and self-reliant egotism. But it glorifies Him when movies promote people and stories that honor Him and advance His kingdom. Dietrich Bonhoeffer called us to the latter. Quote, being a Christian is less about cautiously avoiding sin than about courageously and actively doing God's will, end quote. Bonhoeffer therefore taught us we must stay yielded to His will. Quote, we must be ready to allow ourselves to be interrupted by God. Next, we must make any changes that are necessary to align with God's purpose. Quote, if you board the wrong train, it's no use running along the corridor in the other direction. As well, we must constantly put our beliefs into action. Quote, faith is only real when there is obedience, never without it, and faith only becomes faith in the act of obedience. We also learn from Bonhoeffer that when we follow Christ fully, others cannot be the same. Quote, your life as a Christian should make non-believers question their disbelief in God. And such a commitment comes at a cost. Quote, salvation is free, but discipleship will cost you your life. However, Bonhoeffer teaches us that such a life is worth all it costs and more. Quote, Christianity preaches the infinite worth of that which is seemingly worthless and the infinite worthlessness of that which is seemingly so valued. As a result, Bonhoeffer famously claimed, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Has Christ called you today? Listeners like you support Denison Forum's mission to deliver news discerned differently. As a ministry nonprofit, we are fully donor supported. To partner with us, please donate today using the donate link in our show notes.